Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Sports Illustrated beat writer on Sports Illustrated. Great to be with you guys today. Of course, I'm also the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast, and it's great to be with you all today. Um, got five specific things I want to talk about today on the Raiders, and five very important issues, especially coming off what they just experienced this weekend with the big upset win of Baltimore. And so let's get right into it today. I want to talk about the first one is stacking. And picture, if you would, stacking wood. If you're ever been in that situation, maybe you're from the city and didn't have a fireplace or whatever, but where you take wood and just stack it up, or you stack anything up. Maybe you stack Tupperware up or dishes up in your counter. It's important for the Raiders to begin stacking wins on top of each other, to begin stacking successes on top of each other. That is the next step in the evolution of becoming a championship organization is stacking. Now you'll hear that term used a lot because it's very, very important. Sometimes with the Raiders, it almost seems like, okay, they'll start to build a foundation and then get washed away like you're building on sand because something will happen and wash it all away. You want to continue to build stacking for several reasons. I am not a Michigan Wolverine fan in the least bit, but many, many years ago, I was um, at a football game at the Big House, and they were playing the Virginia Cavaliers. And Virginia came out playing really well and got a significant lead. And the gentleman I was with, who was very well known in the football world, turned to me and said, "Everybody in here that's a Virginia fan thinks they've got this game." And again, very well known, very successful in the football world. I said, "Yeah, they do." And he goes, "Do you know why they're going to lose?" Now, this is when Michigan was down a lot, and I'm not a Michigan fan. I said, "Why is it?" He goes, "Because Michigan has stacked and built success upon success. And so they still expect to win this game. And because good teams find a way to win when they're not playing well." And he goes, "Virginia's never here." And they're on the road against where they're very, not favored. There's no way, they haven't learned yet the process of winning. And sure enough, Michigan came back and won. I've shared this story with you many times. Tom Izzo, the Hall of Fame college basketball coach, a dear friend of mine, talks about the art of learning to win. And he talks about, you no matter how good of a high school player you are, the jump from high school to college is massive. And very few come in and are instantaneous stars. That doesn't mean they don't develop that, but there very few are able to do that because you have to learn how to win again. I can't tell you the number of times Tom and I have discussed when, he's been to more Final Fours over his career than anyone else, including Coach K. And where he has said to me, it this group's got to learn to win. They're not the last group. And that's stacking. And when you are a franchise like the Raiders, your goal isn't to win one game. That's why I thought it was very um, massive. Vontae's comment after the game Sunday that it was a big win, but it's not like we won the Super Bowl. I thought that was a massive win. He was sending a message to his team. Same principle, same exact principle here is the Raiders have got to learn stacking. And when you're a Raider team, going to Baltimore and winning is not the sole goal. Now, you always, anytime you're the Raiders and the Ravens are on the schedule, of course your goal is to go there and win. But it's not an ethereal moment it's not an over the top moment that ends the season. We've talked about having a short memory. We've talked about um, not letting one play impact two. Um, You may remember I talked about this a lot this offseason when I told you how much they believed in Jacorian Bennett. He just had a rough rookie year. Came out, was a starter early, had some things happen. I know that Nate Hobbs disagrees with me, but the actions were, and internally the thought was, he lost a little confidence. They built him back up all offseason, and look, he's playing now like a man possessed. It's learning that if I have a great play, I can't celebrate to the point that it makes me not prepared for the next one. And if I have a bad play, I can't be sullen so it impacts the next one. You never let the last play impact the next play. That's stacking. And that's something now that the Raiders are a franchise whose goal is just win. This is a franchise that's all in it for Super Bowls. I don't think they're a Super Bowl this team this year, obviously, but what they're doing is they're building and laying a foundation for future success of the franchise, stacking. Now let's go to something that Nick Saban talked to me about, and it's about mentality. And I literally learned this from Nick, is understanding that when you take on a team, you're playing yourself. Now, I'm going to ask you this question, and I think most of you will understand it. How many times? Now, I've only been covering the Raiders 5 years, but multiple times, almost every season I've covered them, they come out and get a big win, and then get all celebratory and excited, and then the next week they lose. They lose momentum. They don't build. Stacking, it's another example of stacking. And Nick Saban, one of the things, and I believe it was the number one reason he was successful is he was a great recruiter. He could identify and recruit talent. But if there was a second key to what made him great, and I've often thought about writing a book about him if you want to know the truth, but if there was a second key, was he taught his players that you are competing against yourself. So it didn't matter who was on the schedule. So if they were playing Peyton Manning in an AFC Championship game, it didn't matter if they were playing them or at that time the lowly Detroit Lions. You are competing against the standard you set for yourself. Very few people in life are able to do that. Very few. And very few people are able to do that in the corporate world. Businesses is what I'm talking about, or franchises in this case. You compete against yourself. How many times have you heard me say over the 5 years the Raiders played up or down to their level of competition? Now, it doesn't matter who is at quarterback. The Carolina Panthers are not a real good football team. They're still an NFL team. There's still plenty of talent. There's still guys on that team the Raiders would like to have, or most other teams would like to have. They're still an NFL team. And so, in the process of building a champion, point number one is they got to continue to stack. But the game this week isn't against the Carolina Panthers. The game this week is against themselves. The game this week is the standard that they set. Through 2 games, Gardner Minshew leads in 2 very critical categories for quarterbacks. Through 2 games, Gardner Minshew is playing well. He's playing well. But the standard for Gardner is Gardner. The standard for Max is Max. Colton Miller did a lot of really good things that last quarter and a half of that Baltimore game. And the reason I told you with confidence afterwards that you bet on Colton, I know him. Colton sets the standard as Colton. Not, okay, we're playing Carolina, I only have to go 60% or 80%. That's how you lose. And the great teams come out and steamroll the people they're supposed to steamroll, beat the people they're supposed to beat, and occasionally grab an upset on the road, which is what they did at Baltimore. A big deal. And so one of the things that I'm looking for out of the Raiders this week is that mentality. I am looking from them that we're stacking. Absolutely, they're stacking. When I say we're, I'm using their voice. We're stacking, but we're playing to our standard. This is what we expect of us. That's why you'll see teams come out and beat people by 70. And I'm not in the NFL. I'm talking about college. But then you'll see them come out and win a squeaker. It's just playing up to the standard that you set. Again, I heard Nick Saban preach that, and I think it's absolutely true. I'll use myself as an example. My father was a tremendous father. So for me, the standard of which I judge fathers, including myself, is very, very high. So if I have a child that's very low maintenance, my son Shane, it's very low maintenance. Okay. He's very easy to father. But I still set the standard high for how I fathered him than maybe some of my children that maybe aren't as low maintenance. You want to be that person in your life. It's how you build consistency. Great winning organization, great winners as human beings are people that are consistent. They're just steady eddies. They don't get too high, they don't get too low. They just understand the standard. The third thing I want to talk to you about is leadership on this team. Now, you saw Max Crosby when they're switching the fields and the offense was playing horrible, horrible. Get up. Now, I'm using the term get into Minshew's face, and 99% of the time when you use that, that's in a negative connotation, and that's not how I mean it here. But get into them, and we believe in you. We need you. We're going to win this game. It's leadership. Irvin Magic Johnson, and I've known Irvin for a long, long time, going back to Lansing, Michigan, with his dad's trash company. So for people that know him, they call him Irvin. Everyone else calls him Magic, but for Irvin, um, I asked him one time. We were in the bowels of the Breslin Center, and I was interviewing him, and I asked him about being a great player. I think Irvin is a great player. I don't think he's a good one. I think he's a great one. I think he's a top 5 player. And I said to Irvin, "What is the difference about great players? What sets them apart?" And his answer to me was brilliant. Um, I've shared it many, many times, but it was brilliant. He said, "You can't. A great player is a good player who makes others around him better. It isn't that he's even that much of a better player. He just makes everybody around him better. So then the level of play around him is better, and then a rising tide rises all ships." I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was complete brilliance that he understood you can be good, but to be great, you've got to make others better. That is a massive deal. That is an extremely massive deal. And you saw that with Max. You saw it. Now, there were a couple other players that had some moments like that that just weren't as demonstrative and caught on television. Robert Spillane had some. Christian Wilkins had some. Devontae Adams had a very, very, very strong moment. Um, I was told about. So you saw in a few players, but that's leadership. When the guys that are in charge, when the guys whose job it is, players, to make everyone around them, it was Crosby coming out. We refuse to lose. We believe in you. You're our guy. Now go do it. Those type of things. That's why the Carolina Panther week to me could not have come at a better time. There is no disrespect from me about the Carolina Panthers. They're a pro NFL team with pro NFL talent. Do I think they're the best team in the NFL? No, I think they're the worst team in the NFL. I don't know if I'd call them worst, but I think they're a bottom 5 team for sure. But that doesn't mean they're going to come in here, lay down, and quit. They're going to fight. They're pros. There's good players on that side of the ball. I don't think there's as many on their side as the Raiders. I don't think their coaching's as good, but they're still a team fighting for pride in the National Football League. And so the Raiders aren't playing Carolina this week. And you know what? They're not playing Carolina any week. The standard they're playing against is what they set, and their standard is Super Bowls. Super Bowls. Years ago, one of the interesting things that Jim Tressel at The Ohio State used to do when he was the head coach there is he would grade every player's performance every week. Was it national championship worthy? Was it Big Ten championship worthy? Was it bowl game worthy? Was it average, below average, poor? Now, when Jim was at Ohio State, his mentality was a national championship mentality. So he would say to his guys, okay, do you want to play for a bowl game, which is 6-6, 6-5? All right. It's a little bit better than average, but it's not anything special. You're not going to get to the NFL with a bowl game mentality. You want to play for a Big Ten championship? Some of you will get there. Talking about the pros with that kind of effort. Do you want to play with a national championship effort? Because if you play there, pretty much everybody goes to the pros. And he would grade guys even when he first got there, and the team wasn't where it would eventually get. He set that standard. That's the standard that championship programs, championship franchises establish. And that's what Raider Nation now needs to be acutely aware of. The Raiders will lose games this year. There's 15 left. That's going to happen. But what you're keying in on and what you're paying acute attention to is, are they stacking? Are they stacking? Are they playing with the standard of themselves? And is their leadership present? And it's not coaches. I've shared this before. A player coach team is better than a coach team. It's just the standard. It's absolutely the standard. One of the reasons that made Kobe Bryant great, absolutely a great player, was he set a standard and he lived by it every single day. There is an adage in sports that if your best players are your hardest workers, you've got a chance to be really good because they set the standard for the rest of the team. If if AP goes up and rips into Max Crosby, who is the best player on the Raiders and a top 5 player in the NFL, if AP goes up and rips into Max Crosby, you don't think every other player on that team knows he'll rip into me? You don't think so? Of course they do. That's leadership. Understanding what you got. The fourth thing I want to talk about is the Raiders are facing Andy Dalton. Okay, quarterback switch for Carolina. They get the number one guy that they deem as number one, and clearly they're willing to bench him. Not worried about his self-confidence, not worried about anything. We're going to Andy Dalton. Why? They want to win. Andy's won a lot of football games in the NFL, but guess what? The Raiders have Marvin Lewis, who knows Andy Dalton thoroughly. That's a huge advantage for the Raiders. It is a massive advantage of the Raiders. And first of all, Marvin Lewis is a defensive mastermind. And the Raiders have one of those in defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, but any bit of information makes the Raiders better. I think that's another reason that it's going to be a good weekend for the Raiders, is that it's not just a changing quarterback who's, not done much in the last couple of years, but it's somebody that there is familiarity with on that staff. I don't think it's getting talked about enough. I think it's a very big deal. And I think it puts the Raiders in a very unique position. And then the fifth thing I want to talk about, and it's the last thing, is I want to talk about Allegiant Stadium. Now, Carolina is not a team that travels well. It just doesn't. It isn't like the Steelers are going to be in here. It isn't like you're going to see Green Bay or San Francisco. This is Carolina. And you've heard AP talk about this week on social media about getting the crowd to Allegiant Stadium. Your team is coming off the biggest upset in the NFL this year, last week. They're now coming into your house. The Raiders are doing what they need to do to build you a winner. Now, Raider Nation needs to show up and make sure they have the home field advantage. I've seen the Raiders with the home field advantage a few times. I'm thinking 3 in particular. This is one they should win to get above 500, and then they continue to stack. They continue to build. They continue to move in the right direction. I think this is going to be a very big statement by Raider Nation. Raider Nation at Allegiant Southwest down at SoFi, the first game of the year was unbelievable. I'm gonna guess 70% of the crowd, and there was a little bit more than normal. Usually it's probably 75 or 80, but new coach, some excitement in LA. Crowd was unbelievable. I told you that loss to the Bolts in week 1 is going to hurt the Raiders all year. Still does. Still does hurt them. They should be 2-0 and they know it. They had the crowd. Then they go to the Ravens, and really in the second half, but again, about halfway through the third quarter, they just took over the stadium, and they were so loud. I was down in the bowels of M&T Bank Stadium after the game on Sunday, and it sounded like Allegiant. You could hear the fans screaming, "Raiders." It was so impressive. Now, it wasn't close to 70% crowd, but I bet you, and I don't know that I can give a guess, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the Ravens have a lot of black in their colors, so there were people I thought were Raven fans that were that I thought were Raven fans that were Raider fans. When they turned, I saw what their jersey was. But if I had to guess, I'd say 20 to 25% Raiders. I've heard a couple people say a little bit higher, um, but I think I'm trying to be conservative to be accurate. 20 to 25% Raiders, and it was loud. I mean, when the Raiders began to, you could just feel it in that fourth quarter, and you could hear it. And I remember I'm in an englassed press box, and you could still hear it. This is a big chance for Raider Nation to make a statement on a big game, on a very big game, to make that statement. The players are doing their part. The organization's doing their part. We've got our coach. Make that statement. And again, I'm using the voice of Raider Nation, not myself, but to make that statement. Very powerful. All right. 2 quick things I want to talk to you about that are very, very important. I'm going to be in Lot J with my beautiful wife, Shannon, before the game. I'll get out there 2.5 hours before the game. I look forward to meeting you. So if you're out there, please stop and say hello. Would love a chance to just say hi, shake your hand, get to know you, introduce you to my wife. But it's going to be fun. We always enjoy hanging out with Raider Nation, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I've had several people invite me to other lots, but because of time constraints, I usually just can't do it. Possibly later in November or December. So if you're in other lots that are within a walking distance, send me an email, and certainly we'll do our best. Maybe even not in November, but December, we'll certainly try. We'll try in November, but I don't know that we can just because of my pregame commitments, but would love to. I've had a few people ask me, not a few, but several, about getting a chance to meet people when we go, when the Raiders go, of which I'm part of it. So we on the road. The best place to meet me is 2.5 hours before the game at the media entrance. I would love a chance to say hi. Um, or if you have a Saturday night event, I can't always get away for those, but from time to time I can. So if that's the case and you're having a Raider event at an away game on a Saturday night, I will do my best. No promises, but make sure you send me an email with all the information. I'll certainly try. My point is, I love to meet all of you. So please make it a point. I'll be looking for you. Would like to meet you. Also, want to announce this again. We have so many listeners in Europe. I am going to be in Scotland. I'm coming to Scotland for a Raider Nation meetup. I hope to know this week or next if it's going to be in Edinburgh or Glasgow. I'll let you know that. It's going to be at a restaurant of some sort, maybe a tavern. I don't know. There's some other folks are handling that for me. Um, but it's no cost. You have to handle your own food and drinks, but there's no cost. And we just spend a night talking Raiders. So I'm really looking forward to meeting you guys in April. Please make it a point. I think it's the 29th, but please make it a point to come there and be there. If you live in Scotland, if you're anywhere in the UK or Europe, I heard from a guy in America that said he's thinking about going over for it. Heard from some people in some European countries, Spain, that said, "Hey, I'm thinking about coming over for it." So I'd love to meet some of you that are outside the country. Have had a couple people ask me from other countries, "Would you come to ours?" If you get enough people, we certainly will. And as you know, I do these meetups around the country, so I certainly love the opportunity to meet Raider Nation. Y'all are simply the absolute best. So thank you for joining us, and thanks for being with us again. 5 keys now of what we're looking for from the Raiders this week. This is not a disrespect to Carolina, but they're not playing Carolina. And if they were playing the Chiefs this week, well, I'd probably say they're playing the Chiefs. But if they're playing anyone else other than the Chiefs, I'd say they're still playing themselves. They're playing their standard. It's important to watch them begin to stack. I'm looking for that, and I believe that you are too. Thanks, everybody. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.